I was wondering if you could tell me a bit about your story about how you started the Failcon conferences.
Sure. So I've been doing events in the startup community now for about 4 years. I started in 2007. Our first events were on the Facebook platform, which had launched in, I believe, July of 2007. Through that clientele, we started to do events for the startup community as a whole for early stage founders. Around that time, I started developing my own startup, which we called Trogger. Long story short, we worked on it for about 9 months and it failed. We spent about $80,000 of our own dollars on it. I still think it was a neat idea, but we just didn't execute it well. While we were working on it, I was attending and producing conferences to make some money on the side and realized very quickly that I was getting bored at these shows. I was getting bored at my own shows. And I realized that the reason was that I could be inspired by the speakers on stage, but I couldn't take their story and apply it directly to my startup. They could tell me exactly what they did, exactly how they got to that successful point, but because I didn't know the same people, I didn't have the same funding, it wasn't the same market, I couldn't do that. And I would have rather heard, well, we made these early hiring mistakes and it didn't work out, so lesson learned. Or, well, we didn't iterate faster, we lost a lot of money in the beginning, so that was really hard. Because those are lessons that I can actually take and say, okay, don't do that. At least eliminate those things. So from that, Failcon started. That was back in February of probably 2009. And from there it's just grown. It started off as it was going to be just a half-day evening seminar, and everyone seemed to love the idea. They said, yeah, I do want more events like that are telling me, well, don't do this, don't do that, and are getting really respected and really successful people on stage to say, hey, I wasn't always successful. Here's kind of the mistakes I've made. And the show's just really taken off.
Oh, fabulous. I know that the thing that prompted my project was my own failure at raising venture after 5 years in London. So I can be reassured that that definitely is a huge motivating factor, that you would do things you wouldn't normally do and step outside of your own comfort zone and step outside of your own reality, I guess, and look at new ways of doing things. So it's extremely valuable. What would you say that people get most out of your conferences?
I would say this kind of follows up on what you said. What you just mentioned is looking at someone who is successful and seeing in them that they weren't always successful, seeing that they maybe had to mortgage their home, or one of them was separated from his wife for a while, or had to declare bankruptcy, and they were where you are now, or even lower. I mean, losing homes, losing apartments, and they bounced back. That they have these stories of, listen, once you get as low as you can get, suddenly getting higher again isn't so hard. That you realize, well, if that's really as bad as I can get, well, why not try again? Like, if that's the worst I could have. And I think a lot of founders come away with both a realistic approach to what a startup is actually going to be like, that it's not just these great successes. Like, don't think that that's what it is. You just make a product and bam, it's really popular. But they also come away with this idea that, hey, I can do this, and it will be really hard, but these successful people started where I started, and it makes that a little more tangible and gives me and other attendees kind of more actionable things that we can start with.
So it sounds like the stories are what inflame and passion the attendees. Is that correct?
It certainly seems that way. Okay. People do ask for a mix of, and I try to do this, have 1 or 2 speakers that are just telling their stories. Those seem to be the most inspiring things. I also try to have a few workshop sessions that are more kind of what can you do right now early on to either stop a failure that you're encountering or to prevent it down the road. So they're not all just stories. Some of them are very actionable goals, but I do try to shelf it, like bookend it with 2 really good stories.
And I know you actually had a startup you were mentioning, which failed unfortunately. But I wondered if you could give any tips to women who may be currently thinking about or actually raising venture or angel capital.
Sure. So my lessons are predominantly for kind of web apps. So things that I don't have very good advice for, like building the next biotech company.
Okay.
But my number one piece of advice for anyone working on the web and looking to raise funding in like a web app or any sort of online tool, B2B or B2C, is start with your minimal viable product. The Lean Startup movement is about this, and some close colleagues of mine have the same idea, that don't try to build a huge product with 10 different features because you think they're all cool. You'll just never get anywhere. You'll never be able to launch anything. You'll be stumbling, you'll be spending a lot of money, and by the time that you do release it, you've never tested it. You don't know if your customers actually want it. Elizabeth Yin has a great story with her past startup where it failed for that reason, and now she's launching something that was literally, her product when she launched was some emails between friends. And it was this whole idea that she could sell advertising for them.
Yes, she mentioned.
Yeah, okay, great, so you've talked to her.
Yes.
And it's this idea that now she's raising funding for that. She has a very simple, just one-page website, and then as she figures out how her clients are using it and what sort of things they're asking for, she's slowly tacking on things.
Yes, it's a very inspiring story.
Yeah, and that was our biggest mistake, was we kept trying to build this startup and launch it with leaderboards and points and comment threads and status symbols and website integration and Facebook integration and embeddability, and then we launched it after 6 months of working on it and $70,000 spent, and everyone said, I don't really get it. I don't really get what I'm supposed to do with it. And we didn't have any time left to fix it. So that's my number one piece of advice, is launch something small really, really early.
Right.
And then fix it as you go along.
Right. And that would be my advice too, so
Yeah.
let's come out of failure.
Yeah, it seems to be the biggest mistake that every first-time founder makes, is trying to launch something really cool right away rather than something very small and simple. Like, even if it's not getting press, that's okay. Just test it slowly and build up.
And the big element really is to actually go where the demand is rather than to try and supplant your own ideas. on top
Yes,
of
we
people.
also did that too. Yep, we kept having our users say, I don't get it, and our response was, well, you're not the target audience. We'll find a new target audience. Bad idea.
Things we do.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Would you have experienced any bias of women who have been trying to raise capital at all yourself, or heard stories about that?
I personally, when I was talking to VCs, didn't feel any bias.
Right.
Part of that could have been because I was young and very clearly not at the family age, which tends to normally be the bias. I was 23, obviously single, obviously not having babies anytime soon. I certainly could find stories. I don't have them immediately off the top of my head. There was the great one that just got press, was Jessica Jackley of ProFounder having
Yes, I interviewed
twins.
her. Yeah.
And her actual investor writing a blog post that was like, I'm nervous that she is having twins. I wouldn't be if she were a man. And her
great that
wife
he
was
was
having
honest.
twins.
Yeah.
Yes, I actually didn't get, I was really upset at people that got very angry at him, because I was like, he wasn't attacking her. He was saying, community, I understand that
He was
this
very
is not
courageous.
right,
Yeah.
that this is not a good thought for me to have, but tell me why I shouldn't have it. And I hated the people that just said, well, because you're a jerk. You're like, that's not fixing this industry.
Contribute.
Right. So that's a famous story of that bias.
Yes. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciated the feedback, and I'm looking forward to the Fail conference.
Thank you. I hope to see you there.